Are we in? Are we live?
We're in, Ashley.
Awesome. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Legal Services of Eastern Michigan Legal Live conversation, where today we'll be talking about Juneteenth and the history of housing and fair housing in America. We are so excited to have you here today. My name is Ashley, like Ashy Knees, and I am the Fair Housing Education and Outreach Coordinator for Legal Services of Eastern Michigan. And with me, one of my favorite people ever.
Katie Stanley here. Ashley is also one of my most favorite people ever, and I am the Fair Housing Education Manager at Legal Services. So I have to say, Ashley, I'm particularly excited about this one.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited. Juneteenth is one of my favorite holidays. So with us today, we have some really phenomenal individuals, because I mean, when don't we ever have phenomenal individuals? But today we have some cold stone hitters. All right. And if I know Xander, in just a moment, they're going to magically appear on our screen. Boom.
Oh, here they come.
Here they come. I should have put.
And all of our speakers, you guys
can
start to unmute yourselves for us when you're ready.
And our first question. You got a little funky. I hope that's not my internet. We're going to see. But you all know, look, we've lived through a pandemic. We are going to do what we can with the technology that we have, and we're going to roll like that, okay? In the spirit of Harambe Ashe, it is what it is. So, surprise question, sneak attack, right? First thing we want to know is, okay, not sneak attack. I should do lingo. Is who are you? And what is who are you? What organization or entity are you representing, if any? And what is one of your superpowers? Ooh, who are you? What organization or entity are you representing, if any? And what is one of your many superpowers? And this can go to anyone to begin.
I didn't think you were going to get anybody to volunteer to go first, so I will. Of Spectacle Productions, and my superpower is I get over it like that.
Oh, that's a good one.
Does that make sense?
No ruminating. Yes, sir. And again, we'll say some of our guests today might be having some tech issues. As always, the technological equanimity of 2020 and 2021. Which one of our speakers wants to tell us next about themselves?
I'll go next. Can you hear me? I'm over here thinking about, like, what is my superpower? My name is Egypt Otis, she, her, hers. I'm owner of Bookstore and Social Hub. We're a Black and Brown bookstore that specializes in local art and local curated products and programming. And I would say, and also organizer, a community and political organizer. I would say that my superpower is my ability to um, assimilate to different cultures and different people. I believe I also had to, as my upbringing, I've had to do that to survive. But it is a superpower nonetheless.
Well, Egypt, I've seen you use that superpower to bring a lot of different people together for the greater good. So you're using that well, for better or worse. Teresa, I know you started to talk. Teresa was having some internet issues earlier, so hopefully she can stay with us today. Teresa, how are you doing over there?
Right? Can you hear me and see me all right now? Yeah.
We can hear you, yes.
I'm Teresa. Good. So I'm Teresa Springer. She, her, hers, or I can't even say it. Aya. We're going to leave that alone right now. Can't even talk. It's been happening all day. But I'm the program director at Wellness Services. I do their grant writing. I manage their programs. And I think my superpower, I have like a villainy superpower and then like a hero-ish superpower. So I would say that I'm really good at pointing out things that are wrong. And a lot of people can't take that. But I'm really good at like walking into a space and being like, nope, 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 no, no. And it's just like it's a really good thing in certain situations. And then my superpower is working to fix those things, like working to ensure that marginalized voices are heard, working to ensure that all people, like things are accessible to all people and not just like able-bodied cis het people.
Teresa, now before we get our last...
Did I lose y'all, or like, are we still here?
We are still
we can
here.
Hear you. Yep, and you're just a little bit delayed.
Like,
so I think you're I think you're hearing us a couple seconds after we talk. So just that's kind of what's happening. But before we move on to Walton, you used a couple phrases that I think are important just for those. Some people might not know what those mean. And it is Pride Month, although we're doing a special fair housing show today. It is Pride Month. So do you want to explain for the audience what you meant by cis? You said cis, het, and able-bodied, I think were your three terms.
Cis, het, and what else did I say? Cis, het, what else did I say? Did I say... So cis is cisgender, and being cisgender... Able. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yep. That's it. So cisgendered is when you are born in the body and you identify like as the body you were born in. So like I was born a female. I was assigned female at birth, and I currently identify as a female, making me cisgender. Somebody like a trans woman may have been born and was like assigned male at birth and then transitioned to female. And so they would be transgendered. And there's a lot of variance in gender in biology and stuff like that. If you don't get it, like look it up. Like there are so many gender variants in society. It's like, whoa. Het is just heterosexual, straight, things like that. So cis het. So I'm a cis hetero, able-bodied, meaning that I don't have any invisible. Well, I do have one invisible disability, and like I'm neurodivergent, like AF. So I'm ADHD, and so like will be like my hidden disability. But like able-bodied, meaning like I don't have any physical disabilities or physical or mental disabilities that are that get in the way of me accessing society.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Thank you so much. I think that's important to.
Right.
Yes, that's great. I just think it's important to mention we're in Pride Month and a lot of those phrases get thrown around and not everyone might know what they mean. And it's important that we respect everybody, differences and all. So what do we have left? We have my favorite coworker. Don't tell the others I said this, but Mr. Kyle Walton, please tell us who you are, where you're from, and what your superpower is.
My name is Kyle Walton. I'm an attorney at Legal Services of Eastern Michigan and its Fair Housing Center. Ostensibly, I split my time between representing tenants and landlord-tenant evictions and pursuing fair housing violations, although the past year has been heavier on the first half. As far as the superpower I have, I will hear random facts and they just get committed to memory. The only downside is they push out other important information. So.
Kyle Walton is our trivia champ. He's organized some trivia for our employees. And if you're ever looking for like a trivia rock star, he's your guy. So Ashley, you want to kick us off? We can jump into our questions. What do you think?
So first question, what is Juneteenth and why is it celebrated? And that's for anyone. It can be for multiple people. So if someone wants to answer and someone else wants to jump in there as well, we invite you to do so.
I was going to make you guys sweat there for a little while, but with Mr. Juneteenth after my name, I think it's only apropos that I answer that question. Listen, it was 1865, almost 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, when General Gordon Granger was dispatched to Galveston, Texas, to announce to the last of the enslaved people that they had won their freedom. During this Civil War, most of the Southern plantation owners had shipped their slaves to Texas for safekeeping, anticipating the freeing of the slaves. So there are a great number of slaves in Texas. They say that that he may have been in Houston on the 13th. He may have been in Dallas on the 14th. And then he finally arrived in Galveston on the 19th, reading General Order 3, which announced to the enslaved people that they were no longer enslaved. Did that answer your question? Oh, why is it celebrated? Well, I tell people all the time, it's the 4th of July for Black folks. You know, as African Americans, we can be happy and proud that America got its freedom in 1776, but it wasn't until 1865 when they started thinking about us, and they thought about us in some horrible ways. The deconstruction of Reconstruction was one of the biggest things that affected us as a people. Redlining, fire hoses, the KKK, it got bad. It got worse before it got better. So what I like to tell people is that we are the children of those who chose to survive. So you can go all the way back to the continent of Africa when they came and they stole our kings and queens and they threw us in the hulls of ships. We survived the Middle Passage. We survived the institution of slavery. We survived the Jim Crow, the first hired, last fired. So we are a powerful people. We are the children of those who chose to survive. And we owe them a great deal. And that's why I celebrate Juneteenth. I'm sure others have other reasons.
I saw Egypt. At least I think I saw Egypt start to unmute.
Mr. Herring answered it. I think he gave a really long description. I was just nodding in confirmation. I literally tell people when people want a short answer of what is Juneteenth, it is the Black people's 4th of July, because as we know, during 4th of July, we as a people were not independent. Although our country was independent, we were not. We were still enslaved. And I believe, we have a lot going on, which I know we'll dive into later, locally, where we can celebrate our freedom.
So, Paul, you mentioned the Emancipation Proclamation. Can someone tell us a little bit more about so we know it's related to Juneteenth, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about the Emancipation Proclamation? What is it?
You know, I haven't memorized the Emancipation Proclamation, but it was which announced to the government and the people of the nation that they're no longer individuals as slaves, that they had to pay us a wage, and that they had to allow us to find housing and things of that matter. To be honest, I haven't read it. I've seen, snippets and paragraphs, and I've talked about it for 30 years.
Yeah, and I would say too, so my understanding of it, and I'm trying to get into like the more legal mechanics, is that when Abraham Lincoln was in office, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. Trying to get my dates right here. And in response to what was going on in the Civil War, he declared that all persons held as slaves within the Confederacy, within the rebellious states, are considered or shall be free. And as you know, rebellious states, right? Meaning not every enslaved person, not every African American was free. And henceforth, we have our new freedom, but there was an ongoing fight within the Union, within the troops, within the Union that declared their freedom through the participation of the war. But the emancipation, and this has been an ongoing discussion for many years and still continues to be, it did not abolish slavery. That didn't happen until the 13th Amendment, which we will go through, I'm sure later. I'm not a professional at this, but I know this is information that's significantly important when we talk about our freedom as a Black people. You have to know your history.
Yeah, and Egypt, what you brought up is so important, that although the Emancipation Proclamation was read and written by Abraham Lincoln, it wasn't until years later that it actually had its full effect, like we talked about, like Paul was talking about. So I guess that kind of puts into context a little bit about why Juneteenth is so important to celebrate, but how historically, what are some ways that it's historically been celebrated, and maybe some ways that we're still celebrating it today?
Oh, nice. Well, Juneteenth started out as a week-long celebration from the history that I've read. Once they got that thing announced in Galveston, Texas, it was on and popping. They say that over the years, the social force to force the celebration to go underground because they were getting attacked by, for lack of a better word, non-believers. So the Juneteenth celebrations kind of went underground and disguised themselves as rodeos in the South. And that went on for some time, almost late 50s. I guess they started a resurgence of public Juneteenth celebrations. And then in the 60s, and it's starting to steamroll. And more people are celebrating. But they actually had to take it underground. Some of the things that are known that the Juneteenth celebration is known for, and I found curious, was strawberry red pop. Strawberry red pop is a staple at almost all Juneteenth celebrations. And I envision out in the cornfields looking up at the big house and seeing the white folks on the porch with these just one experience. So when they to buy a red pop, they did, and it stuck with the celebration.
I did not know that. In Egypt, I feel like I know you've got a bunch of stuff going on. I've been seeing on social media, you got all these events going on. So do you want to tell us about, I know it was kind of a double question, but what are some events that are happening this year? And Paul, feel free to jump in after Egypt. I know Mr. Juneteenth is probably going to know some more events too.
Oh yeah, so I won't go into telling everybody about every single event. There's so many things going on, which is a beautiful thing to see, that people are coming out and celebrating and creating these accessible events to the public so they can learn about their history, which is really important. That's really the values and the principles that we follow here at CAMA. Knowing your history is so important because you're able to have that representation, you're able to identify who you are as a person. So it was only, I think, we had to organize an event for the community celebrating Juneteenth. As a Black woman, I felt compelled that we had to do something. So on Juneteenth, next Saturday from 1 to 9 p.m., we have the Black Buckham Juneteenth Festival, where we have vendor pop-ups that are Black owned, from food trucks to live entertainment and music to entrepreneurship. And of course, programming. So during the initiation of the event, we're going to have a young man who is actually a youth empowerment advocate by the name of Antonio Sweeney. He probably is watching this, to be quite honest with you. He's very plugged in, very active within the community. I believe, Ashley, you know exactly who I'm talking about, because he's part of a group of young people who do a lot of organizing within the community. But he's going to kick off the event with the history, bringing us to the roots of Juneteenth, along with Alpha Esquires, who are part of the Alpha Phi Alpha Incorporated fraternity. They're going to share some poetry. I'm hoping they do a step show, because I love a really good step show. Like, I love it. So we wanted to incorporate all of these historical concepts of what it is to be Black here in America. And of course, in alignment with what Juneteenth actually means to us. So this Saturday, June 19th, from 1 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Thank you so much, Egypt. We're so grateful that you're organizing all these great events in the community for folks to go to.
Oh, goodness.
And it's free.
Yes. It's
a free event. It's you can come to the alley. Of course, you're supporting the vendors and the food, whatnot, by paying, but it's a free event to come and attend.
What? Free 99.
Free 99 is my favorite price.
Look, if it's free, it's for me, most things. And so you have the Black Buckham Fest. Is that the title of it? The official title?
Yes.
Okay.
And we came up with this name because there's quite a few Black owned establishments here in Buckham, in Buckham Alley. And we kind of coined the term Black Buckham. So it was only fitting. We had to call it that.
Well, in Egypt, we might have you back.
Reaching out to.
Yep, because we're thinking about doing a Black business owners special at some point upcoming. So maybe you in Oakland will have to come visit with us again soon.
And you might have to reach out to Kiana McGee and trademark Black. You heard it here, not first, but maybe.
Listen,
and then and I know that there's the I think they have I know that they have events
she's breaking up.
Sloan Museum parade going. I am.
Yeah. Oh, you're back now.
I'm back. Can you hear me now? Good.
You're just a little delayed, but yeah.
We were talking about. Am I? Okay. Well, if you catch what I'm saying, share it out, right? So there's I was saying the traditional Juneteenth, they're hosting events at the Sloan Museum and Longway Planetarium on Friday the 18th. But if I'm not mistaken, on the 19th, they're also having a parade, and they're planning on coming past the Black Buckham Fest as a nod to Comma Bookstore, right? So there's that unity. You also have the Champions Parade and the Flint Citywide Juneteenth celebration. So they have events going on that Friday, Saturday, Sunday as well, right? Okay. And then they have a parade at 12, the Champions Parade. I heard Clarissa Shell's going to be in that thing, and I don't know if anybody watched the MMA fight, but got me pretty hyped for her. You have Key C Events, who's hosting the event in the Brush Park downtown Flint. Okay, so that's going on, and then the Flint Institute of Music commissioned some art from, I want to say, 25 different artists. And so it's not only on Juneteenth, there are also other days, but specifically on Juneteenth, you can go to those different murals, and there's like an audio to go with the visual. With a host of private parties. I know Mr. Juneteenth is having a party that he didn't invite us to, so lots of stuff for sure. All right, Katie, back to you.
So Ashley teed me up, right? For this is my practice area, so I'm pretty passionate about housing and equity in housing. So this next question is relating to what relation is there, and this is for anybody, between housing discrimination and the Juneteenth celebrations?
Well, I'll go ahead and chime in, I guess, since I've been quiet so far. Essentially, as others have stated, the Juneteenth celebrates the emancipation of Black Americans from slavery, but that's only a milestone in the long trajectory towards equality for all U.S. citizens. One of my favorite phrasings and interpretations of the Reconstruction era amendments is that it gave Congress the power to address and remedy badges and incidents of slavery, or in other words, ways of treating Black Americans as second-class citizens. Housing discrimination is such a badge or incident of slavery. They have been disproportionately affected by a lot of American housing policies and private entity practices. So while Juneteenth represents important milestone, housing discrimination persists, and we as a people are still trying to work on remedying that.
So Walton, I think you kind of alluded to this already, but so what impact do the historical fair housing injustices have on the present? And I know this is a huge question that spans from access to grocery deserts to equity in homes to redlining to, it's a huge question, but do you want to take a stab at that, and then feel free others to chime in as well?
Sure, you stole my thunder a little bit by talking about food deserts, because I'm going to sneak that in there. But
well, people might not know what that is, though. Go ahead and tell folks what that is.
So probably the biggest impact that historical discrimination has had in terms of housing is the wealth gap. Possessing or being able to buy or own a home has allowed many American families to build up wealth, and subsequently the property value of the home gets brought back into the community through property taxes, improving a lot of local services, such as your schools and hospitals. The income of the area is also a factor in consideration for private entities, such as grocery stores, as Katie alluded to. So another consequence is that many grocery stores decide not to put up shop in several neighborhoods that are predominantly minority population. And as a consequence, there are about 23.5 million Americans living in what are called food deserts, or areas without access to fresh, nutritious, and inexpensive food.
Yeah, and I know I recently saw a study that was in the last decade that found that most Americans gain their wealth from the equity they have in their homes, the generational equity, and the practices of redlining, which we're going to talk more about later, where there were government instituted policies that restricted who could get these loans for homes. You can trace that line all the way to the present day in home ownership and equity and all of these other pieces. And, you know, these things have an impact that you may not see, and they reverberate across different areas, not just the practice area that Kyle and I are in legally, but we see it throughout clients' lives in a number of different ways. Does somebody else, Egypt, I know you're unmuted. You wanted to add to that?
Well, I just want to say, too, that when we're talking about Juneteenth and we're talking about housing, just to elaborate a little more on the subject of how it shows that even though there was an outlaw of slavery, that racism still existed and permeated our laws, and freed, former enslaved people experienced racism through not even during that time through policy. I think what happened is the importance of enacting and creating policy highlighted the reasons that policy was so important, is because freed people were experiencing precarious housing, or they were either houseless or experiencing inequities and trying to access property. So the importance of policy in the Reconstruction era, which I'm sure that we'll have more of a conversation about, really just shed light of why it's so important to enact policies such as the Fair Housing Act.
I mean, and let's slide right on into it, right? Because we're kind of alluding to it, right? So there's been a few mentions of this term redlining. Teresa, you coming right into the thick of it, Queen. What is redlining?
So redlining was a process that they did back in the day that still impacts us today, where they kind of like drew these lines on a map and then like individuals of color could not access housing outside of those lines, right? And so like it's kind of like how suburbia was created, like suburban America. And outside of these red lines, white individuals had access to loans. They had access to means to purchase like housing in really nice areas. Meanwhile, Black and brown bodies did not have that access. They did not have access to loans. They did not have access to meaningful housing opportunities. And that kind of impacted the school systems and the shopping systems and all of that, and those things, because these lines were drawn, and it just held people in poverty. It was just another way to keep segregation going and to keep Black and brown bodies out of white spaces.
Yes, and Teresa, you
question?
alluded to this a little bit. Yes, and you alluded a little bit to this, but essentially when we think of the New Deal, we think of bridges, we think of construction, we think of the good things about the New Deal, but also a part of the New Deal when FDR was president was to create what was called the Homeowners Loan Corporation, which instituted redlining. And there were areas that were deemed higher risk loans than others. And if you were a person of color or if you were an immigrant, you were automatically deemed higher risk. That was a government instituted policy. And that's why a lot of this, we say, stems from discrimination. A lot of the disproportionate impacts that we see today are a result of the government discrimination of yesterday. So great answer. Walton, I saw you unmute. Did you want to add?
And that was a bar. I just had to throw that out there. That was a whole bar, low key.
Just to give a numerical picture of how disparate the treatment was between the years of 1934 and 1962, the Federal Housing Administration and the Veterans Administration gave out about $120 billion in home loans. 98% went to white families.
And, the fact that the government knows that they did that, the fact that the government knows that they did that, reparations should be simple. That figure that you just listed should be distributed among African Americans in the country. It's amazing that they're turning a blind eye to what they did, and they know what they did. They have apologized to the Japanese for interning them during World War II. They have apologized to the Jews for the Holocaust. And here we sit, 2021, waiting, not only for an apology, but for reparations. It's disgusting.
And I even want to add, I'm sorry, Mr. Herring.
I was done. I just wanted to put my happy face back on.
And two, I also want, since, we are talking about Pride Month as well, housing discrimination still exists today. Now, a little before COVID had happened, I was working on a statewide campaign to amend the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act here in Michigan, which is to end, we don't like to use the word end, right? But we want to say where it is illegal to discriminate against people within LGBTQ community. And then I believe it was also for people who are who are considered a religious minority. And not only did it extend to employment protections, but also housing as well, because without those narrow terms and law, it creates ambiguity, where people will find ways. And I think sometimes people forget, like, you think of a system and it's like, this is the system, and it's people, individuals who uphold these systems and find ways to utilize it to their advantage and to other people's disadvantage.
Yes, and Egypt, you raise a really good point. I know we're on a Juneteenth show right now, but it is also Pride Month, and we talk about this in housing. It's a good point to say that we are also a fair housing center, and if you feel like you've experienced discrimination in housing, you can call us at 800-322-4512. But also, like Egypt was saying, we can't restrict the constitutional rights that we have, but we can add to them. In Michigan, we've added a couple, and one of the things that we did in May 2018 is we decided to interpret, because we can't, we would have to legislate to add a new term, right? Egypt's laughing because she knows how many loops you got to jump through to make this happen. But you can interpret the phrase, and what they've done is interpret the phrase sex in the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act to include sexual orientation and gender. So that, as Egypt said, is still something that's going on. We don't have the express language yet federally or statewide. And so technically there's still a bit of a tension around that, where we're still here in 2021 and we're still fighting for a lot of these rights.
Now, we talked about, we talked about so much. But one of the things I asked the question, what is redlining? But even outside of that, we're interested to understand, what are some historical examples of housing discrimination? So redlining would be one of them. Are there any other examples that would be important for us to discuss or mention in this setting? And I want us to note, even though Teresa's camera is off, her mic came off of mute.
It did. I think what happens is, a lot of times we look at discrimination around race, and that's on purpose, because like there's a lot of discrimination around race. There's a lot of discrimination around Black and brown bodies, and policing Black and brown bodies, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't think that we talk enough about the discrimination that happens around abilities and identities, right? And so when we talk about abilities, we talk about maybe a deaf or hard of hearing person trying to access housing and all the barriers that they come up against just trying to apply for an apartment or a home. We think about somebody in a wheelchair and landlords not wanting to make their homes accessible to individuals that are in wheelchairs. And oh, y'all all blacked out on me. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Yay. But like, and we think about trans identities, and I always say trans identities because somebody that is very masculine presenting, but also very feminine presenting can be, or somebody that is clockable as a trans woman, especially Black trans women, they can be discriminated like at the gate. Like as soon as a visual meeting happens, like that's when it starts, right? So like over the phone, I might be able to pass, but I can't pass once you see me. And now, like, I can't have access to housing, or if I do have access to housing, it is very poor housing. It's in impoverished neighborhoods. It's very like it's meaningless instead of meaningful. And we do that to people with the other identities, right? So Black, Brown, Indigenous, trans women of color, trans men of color, people that identify along the LGBTQ plus spectrum that are quote unquote clockable. Like, so if I'm not presenting as a cisgender heterosexual person, then I'm going to be clocked, and then I'm going to be discriminated against. And it is not based on ability to pay; it's based on appearances. I hope that answered.
Thank you so much. Yes, that's a great answer. I'm just thinking, my mind is going about a million places, but I know for sure I saw Walton unmute, and I think he was really itching to talk about steering.
Talk about what now? Oh, steering.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
So there are a few things. We're at our housing center, and a few of the things that we look for, which, by the way, although there is no express law in Elliott-Larsen, Michigan Department of Civil Rights is taking complaints on LGBT discrimination in housing. So if you experience this, we can help you file a complaint. Don't think that just because we're not fully there yet, we can't help. But there are certain things that we look for in fair housing that have particularized phrases. So Walton, do you want to tell us about a few of those?
Sure. There's the practice of steering, as Katie mentioned, where basically individuals of certain populations are sort of manipulated into a specific geographic area. So in the context of like an apartment complex, that might be putting all your residents with children into one building so that doesn't bug the other ones there. Often accompanied by some sort of pseudo-benevolent idea, but in the end, they're still treating people differently than they ought to be treated.
Pseudo-benevolent? You lost me. Oh, pseudo who?
That's a great phrase. They're pretending to be nice, but it's really not nice.
Yeah. But by pseudo-benevolent, I mean posturing as good intentioned, but not necessarily so. Other examples from history, racial covenants, which were part of deeds and restrictions placed on homeowners that they can't deal or transact with minority families. So what you end up doing is basically calcifying white neighborhoods because the actual owners of the home are disallowed from actually dealing with Black people in order to keep the purity of the neighborhood together. There's also a practice known as blockbusting, which I feel has kind of evolved into what we now call gentrification. But essentially, it was a practice of driving out white families, basically trying to instigate white flight and fear of, the wrong types of people moving into the neighborhood. And they would do things such as pretending to misdial a family and asking for a stereotypically Black name in order to make people think minority families are moving in the neighborhood. Banks would also hire actors to stir trouble in the neighborhood. Basically, whatever they could do to drive out white families and sell that house for a cheaper price and then resell it to minority families.
That's a lot. That's a lot to go through.
Something else that happened right.
You still here? We can hear you, Teresa.
Okay, good. I gotta stop and just wait and see what happens. It's awful over here, y'all. Mercury retrograde kicking me dead in my head. Anyway, what I wanted to say, and something else that happened, and I know this happened to my family, my Black family from the South, because I am a mixed person. So I do have a white family. I do have a large Black family, a large loving Black family. I love them so much. And what happened to our family when we lived in the South, we owned a really large farm, and we were pushed out of that farmland by white rage. Right. And so it was the constant attacks of white people on the land. And it was the KKK movements, the cross burnings, just that violence just returning over and over again, to the point where it's just you know what, we're just going to go ahead and sell this and leave because we can't deal with this anymore. And so I just wanted to kind of not mirror what Walton say, but kind of like add to it, like just like they were like helping with white flight, you know, like that white rage was helping push Black and brown people off of like very large plots of land. Like we had like over 250 acres of land at one point, and you know that was all sold off to get away from that violence. And this would have been in like the 40s and 50s when that land started being sold off and stuff like that.
So, okay. So that takes us right into our next question then. Black families have less than 1/10 the wealth of white families in the U.S.
Tell a story about some historical examples of housing.
Yeah, go ahead.
In our family, my grandfather, Harlan Rudd, in New Jersey, he actually opened up a real estate company. He was high yellow. Do you guys know what that term means?
Tell us, Paul.
It's also known as light, bright, and damn near white. So his skin tone allowed him to pass as a white man. And he would buy property in East Orange, New Jersey as the white man and then come back to his real estate agency, sell it to Black people. So that's how he helped diversify East Orange, New Jersey.
Did anyone else want to add in there?
I was going to say too, Walton mentioned restrictive covenants. There was actually just a case recently litigated by the ACLU of Michigan and our friend Mike Steinberg that had a restrictive covenant in it that the person couldn't own the home if they weren't Jewish. So there's also restrictive religious covenants. These things permeate the law. So go ahead.
And those still exist? That was legal?
No, not anymore.
No, very much not legal.
Very much not legal.
Okay.
But that was a recent case. So these things still crop up where who knows how many generations that restrictive covenant was in those deeds and nobody challenged it until somebody married in a bi-religious relationship.
Okay. Egypt, did anyone else want to jump in there before I go on to the next? The Verners, I see you.
Yeah, right.
So Michigan right now, no, I think everybody has contributed. I have nothing to add to the conversation.
Okay. Next question. So Black families have less than 1/10 of the wealth of white families in the U.S. And though this part isn't written in the questions, something I read recently is for Black families, a greater percentage of our wealth is in our property, in the properties that we own. Right? And so, anywho, how does that impact the Black community within a fair housing conversation? Black families have less than 1/10 of the wealth of white families in the U.S. How does that fact impact the Black community?
I'm currently in a situation here with my parents' home. My father passed away probably about 6 years ago. And I am finding it very difficult to convince my siblings to not sell the house. It's a beautiful house in Grand Blanc, Michigan. It generates monthly income, passive income. And we're just not on the same page. They want a chunk of money now, and I want to know that I've got a chunk of money coming in every month. So just our different takes on wealth and how to handle a property like that is causing grief within the family. They want to sell, and I want to keep. And I'm in the process of trying to buy it from them, and I'm having difficulties with the banks. They're making me change my driver's license address. Have you tried to get an appointment at the Secretary of State? August 24th is the next appointment I can get at the Secretary of State. And I've got to come up with a tangible way of convincing my siblings that monthly is better than lump sum. But we're all in different places. Reality is different than mine. And I see that that's how we probably lose a lot of our institutional or opinion.
So you froze up a little bit there, but every time you froze, you still look so handsome, Paul. No, you did freeze up a little bit there, but the gist of what I got is the conversation that you're having with your siblings around selling your parents' home. They want to sell it now for a chunk. You're like, but I want the monthly income. But then on the end, you wrapped it back around to the question to say that's one piece of it, right? Not actually having the land where we can have that income. Did I get it, Paul? I'm gonna take that as a head nod. Yes. Okay. Egypt, I saw you come off mute. Okay.
I would like
I'm sorry,
to add.
There we go. Yeah, exactly.
I would like to add, this has been an ongoing conversation in my head and within my household. As a business owner, I have begun to really see the value of ownership. And that is something that has been inaccessible to Black people because we were incapable of purchasing property, which is why there has been an inaction of the fair housing laws, because it was illegal for Black people to purchase property, which is how we know, a majority of white people were able to generate equity, and accumulate that generational wealth that Black people have historically been pushed out of. And, the gap of the wealth gap, it's still existent, and Black people are still suffering in housing. And I'm honestly quite afraid to see what the future holds in this age of COVID, because there has been so many conversations about how is housing going to look like for Black people who have experienced such inequities in housing already. So of course we can only imagine if the average American may be suffering in housing, that Black people are going to suffer even more. So in the age of COVID, I'm really waiting to see what those numbers are going to look like right now. And I'm quite alarmed, and I'm waiting to see exactly what that's going to shed light on. But just from a historical context, Black people have not been able to purchase property, to generate equity, and to pass it on to their family members. And thus we are really behind. We don't hold a majority of the property and the wealth here in America by far. Banks would not lend to Black people. And as Mr. Walton was just explaining, a lot of the things and the people would resort to just keep Black people out of areas that were white. And this is an ongoing thing that we experience in America even today. Being able to just have a home, even in an apartment, is hard to achieve in a safe location. For the average Black person is difficult. Now, when you want to talk about purchasing a home, owning land, that's a reality that is so far removed from the average Black person, because oftentimes we always live in a state of survival. We can't think for the next 2 generations because we have to prepare for next month's rent. And I also want to add too that a majority of evictions are overrepresented in Black women. So think about that as well. And 80% of the person's income is given and invested into rent. So how can we, thinking about those numbers, can expect for Black people to purchase property when we can't even survive?
Kyle, I saw you on mute. Did you want to add to that? No? Okay.
He's like, nah, I can't go after that.
He's like, that was perfect.
And to your point, like scientific fact, right? Poverty decreases the IQ. if I have to constantly make decisions about my survival, I can't even matriculate up the pyramid of Maslow's. I can't, I'm still on survival. How am I going to transcend beyond that? Oh, Egypt. Oh, Egypt. I'ma just pin because you'll have me all in my feelings. Cousin Katie, back to you.
I know. Well, and Egypt raises a really interesting point. She's been talking about all the Juneteenth events and the Black Buckham event that they're hosting. Flint was actually the first city in the nation to enact by popular vote a fair housing ordinance before we passed the National Fair Housing Act, just months before. And that was born out of GM segregated housing. Black GM workers, even then, couldn't get in the same housing as the white GM workers. And that's what started that. There was protests on City Hall lawn. They turned the sprinklers on them. There were gunmen on the roof pointed down. The KKK was involved and fought that and tried to petition to get it repealed. I mean, that is in our recent history. The Fair Housing Act is only 51 years old, y'all. Like, in my parents' lifetime, these things were still happening. To say now that doesn't affect this generation where we are now, to me, just is closing your eyes and being willingly blind. So,
well, you know what I thought was the craziest thing when I moved to Flint? It was amazing to me. I used to work for a youth program. And part of my job was to pick up the kids to bring them to the center, right? So I would go over on Foss Avenue, and 3 houses over here had the kids in it, and then 2 houses over across the street had their sisters and brothers in it. It was like the whole family was on the block paying rent for 6 different houses, paying consumer powers for 6 different houses, paying food for different houses, instead of consolidating and living in an extended family situation, which is how we survived. When they wouldn't let us buy houses, we moved auntie in, we moved grandma in, we moved in. We had built-in cooks, cleaners, and daycare. And over the years, I think intentionally, they made it less desirable to live in an extended family situation. What do you mean? You living with your mama? You need your own space. So I think socially, we were directed at rental units. You know what I mean? You can't stay in your mama's house if you're 25 years old. You need to have your own spot. And I don't know who made that rule, but I really want to slap them hard in the face.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I won't go into all of my business, but even when COVID hit, I'm like, yo, ma, sell your house. And she had a house out in Flushing. I'm like, sell your house. Move into the house with me. We don't know what's gonna happen, but also I'm able to own a house with little ease because I had because I had family, because I had a mother who had purchased properties, right? I just had to take care of it and take care of the fees, right? So to your point, like, no, actually, it's a pretty cool thing to do. Where did that notion come from? I also want to shout out, you said you used to work for a youth program, and I feel like that youth program was that the Freedom Schools, and was that with Mama E. Hill Deloney? The program you're referencing, is it something different? Okay, so you gotta play homage and shout out Mama E. Hill Deloney. Just because you got to do that.
Well, I was definitely going to get there in the Juneteenth portion of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity, and it was so kismet as to how it happened. I met Mrs. T. I borrowed a cabin from a friend of mine up north, and we were headed to the cabin. We hung out at the cabin. Sunday morning, there came a knock on the door. And I opened the door, and it was Miss E. Hill Deloney asking me what I was doing in her house. I said that I had gotten the keys from DeVere, and she said, "Oh, that's my baby DeVere. Okay, it's okay." And she said, "We'll just go up the street. We got another house up the street." Funny thing is, I had a job interview the following Wednesday, and when I walked into the interview, guess who was sitting there? Mrs. E. Hill Deloney.
See, life has a funny way of bringing us all together. It's right. And that's how, you guys, this has honestly been one of the best conversations that we have ever had on the Legal Lounge. I can't tell you guys, we have so many questions left that we didn't even get to because our guests were just so engaging that we didn't even make it there. So I want to close this out with one last question for you all. I'm going to do a bit of a combo question. So it might be hard for us to imagine, but what would a community look like without fair housing discrimination? And in your view, what can we do to further this?
I'll chime in with my dream, I guess. A community without fair housing and justices is a more diverse, stronger neighborhood. More people that we have that are from different backgrounds, the more we can help understand each other, the stronger the economic stability of the area. And there's sufficient arguments and studies looking into that question itself, including economist Tim Harford, who makes a pretty good argument in his book, Messy, that more diverse neighborhoods are stronger neighborhoods.
I guess my utopian,
Wow.
what I would like, or it would create a sense of community amongst each other, unity, opportunities to leverage their personal property to achieve the goals that they want to achieve within their homes, generational wealth, and accessibility to resources that weren't accessible to Black people in particular. May I add one more thing?
Sure.
Yeah.
Since we're at the close.
Of course.
Books in my hand. So since we've been exploring these topics, I selected some books that we actually carry in the store if you want to learn more about it. So we have 400 Souls here by Ibram X. Kendi. And this actually covers everything from the Emancipation Proclamation to fair housing to the post-transatlantic slave trade. Then you have Evicted, which is, I actually grabbed this from my house. You can see the notes in here that I take because I've read this book 2 times. It has some very just powerful information about the history of eviction and housing in the United States and the disparities among people of different races. And then since we're talking about redlining here, we have The Color of Law. I was really sad because the author, Richard, actually came to the University of Michigan, Flint, and then it had to be postponed because COVID happened. So I was really disappointed.
That was us. That was actually us, Egypt. So next year, we've got a box full of The Color of Law books that we would love to share with our viewers if they want to. So hopefully we can get you involved in that because you weren't around when we were planning that, I don't think. I love it.
Yes.
I
would love to. And might I also add to, I used to be a housing case manager for the PSH program. So housing is something that I was a housing case manager at the housing inspector license and everything. So I would definitely love to join further conversations on this particular topic with you all.
And
Ashley, before you take, I know there's just so much there, but I have to put this in there. No, she's gonna take us out. I know she's gonna take us out, but I have to say, Egypt, maybe we can do, if the viewers are interested, a book club in partnership with Bookstore, where folks can learn more about their fair housing and housing rights and the history of see, Kyle's got some books references he wants to. So maybe pin that, just put that in the hopper for now. But viewers, maybe book club to come at Bookstore.
Boom. And put those Color Law
syllabus for sure.
Say that again, Teresa.
Yes.
I said it'd be dope to have a syllabus for sure. Like a syllabus to go after this. Like, okay, you attended this. Like, here's your reading materials. Like,
I love that, Teresa.
Ooh, we'll be on the line. Okay, so P and side note, y'all don't know this, but Comic Bookstore is my happy place. The Color of Law, I heard legal services. We have some of those. I'm gonna get with our team on that. Can you put those other 2 on hold for me? I'll be up there this weekend to get my books. Kyle, what was that book that you just flashed?
This is just a short collection of 6 essays called Perspectives on Fair Housing, and it goes over the history leading up to the Fair Housing Act and subsequent developments in its trajectory. So it's a nice little summary, kind of like introductory. It's only like 140 pages. So
boom and pen. If you can't tell, I love books. I got excited. Yeah. Teresa, I saw you come off mute, and then Paul, I feel like you have something to share as well.
Nope, I didn't come off mute. I've been off mute. I was listening to y'all. It was just like finally like catching the flow of like the conversation without interruptions, and I was just so happy. I didn't want to touch nothing.
Okay. And Paul, were you about to throw something?
You know, here's what I wanted to say. If you force a racist to rent to a black person, what have you really accomplished? They're still racist. You know what I mean? The law is making folk. Do we change the hearts of racists by legislation and law? I don't think so. I think the only way we can change the hearts of racists is through their children. And their children's experiences are going to be different than their experiences. You know, my kids have a plethora of international friends in their circle. Way more than I had when I was a kid, but I can see it's increasing. So my goal is, I'm thinking within 20 years, maybe my lifetime, we will see a society that's free of racists. They'll all die out. And I've been hoping for that since I was born. You know, yeah. I guess I'm naive, and I take the approach that these people have to die. They have to leave this place. And in order for us to move forward, we need to grow some diversified children. We don't need to keep them on the north side. We need to expose them possibly can. Program that Deloney ran, that Coalition for Positive Youth Development, was the kids all over the country. They met people from all over the country. They experienced things that their parents, who had never left Flint, experienced. So I think, what does a community do in the absence of fair housing and justices? We kind of got to wait. And that's sad. I'm done.
Yeah. Can I add to that?
What do you mean?
Because, like, I completely
okay.
agree with Mr. Juneteenth. and want to add that, you know, we have to look at the groups of people, at our friend groups, at our family groups, and we have to like be mindful of who we have in our circles. Like, so like if you have how can I put this? I'm just gonna say it. If you have like a racist best friend, like, why is that your best friend? Like, why do you want to hang around racist people? Why is your friend group not diverse? Why don't you have like individuals from all walks of life in your friend group? And so if your friend group is all white and you're only experiencing whiteness, then any like stereotype or like fallacy that you hear about other people, you tend to believe because your friend group believes it. And so like if we don't open ourselves up and create diverse networks within ourselves, within like, and then understand like why all the Black people sit together in the cafeteria type stuff, then like we won't be able to achieve what Mr. Juneteenth is saying. Like we're just gonna perpetuate our like the racism of the past, right? It's just gonna come in a different way. Like I remember my mom used to be like, "Watch your back, baby," because racism is done with the handshake and a smile. And I'm like, "Yes, ma'am. Like I get that." And like as a kid, I was like, "I don't get it," but as an adult, I was like, "Oh yeah, handshake and a smile for sure." But like until we like diversify our friend groups, diversify our places of work. Like if you work for an organization and your organization is all white, then you are doing it wrong. And I don't care, like fight me type deal. But yeah, like we won't be able to achieve these things unless we like get uncomfortable and look at ourselves in a really deep way. I digress.
Don't digress.
I 100% agree. familiarity is the best panacea for prejudice, in my opinion.
Okay.
Well, and
So,
Ashley, can we, before we plug our audience questions, I feel like the one thing we didn't mention that the audience might want to know about is that we do, to uncover discrimination, we do what's called fair housing testing in the community. If you're somebody that wants to volunteer and do fair housing testing, that's one thing that you can do to help end discrimination in our community. And essentially what that is we send folks out to rental properties or to lenders to test for discrimination. So if one person is treated differently than the next tester, then we can uncover that discrimination without them having to actually expressly say it. We can see it in the different treatment. So if you're someone that's interested in becoming a fair housing tester, please also reach out to us after. Ashley, back to you.
Yes, because we need more fair housing testers with colorful skin. And by colorful, I mean ranges of color on their skin and different lived experiences and abilities and appearances. So we need you. If so, okay, Zan, do we have? Can we get like 2 audience questions?
We got some audience questions, guys. We couldn't let you go yet without slipping those in.
Got it. Oh, I love this. Okay, Bada Bada. I recently learned who this is. Finally, I know who Bada Bada is, and she is about it. Anywho, there is multi-housing proposal on the table in Flint for a 50-year tax abatement for a affordable housing project with a secret developer now. But those people want city benefits, but they do not live in Flint. Oh, how is that fair housing for Flint? Straight to it. Who can answer? Who can offer some thought?
I'm 100% behind them not getting the pilot. Just hate the fact that these developers come into a city, which is akin to us being on the ground, doubled up, and then a 50-year pilot program, payment in lieu of taxes. It's like picking our pocket while we're on. Their business plan should not be based. Oh no. The business plan should not be based on them getting a tax credit. I don't think it's affordable housing. I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to cater to the doctors, the interns, and the students over at Hurley Hospital. They're telling us that their rents are going to be in the 800s and 900s for a 1-bedroom and a 2-bedroom apartment. That is ludicrous. When in the state you can buy a house for $10,000 with a house payment of less than $350. So I think it's all taking advantage of the situation. They've seen us as a place to pick. They're coming in here to take from our community, and I'm not having it. I don't want it. We got the same situation over here in University Square. We got this beautiful park across the street. They're planning on demolishing it to put in apartment buildings. And their guise is that it's for the poor people. But they've got the same model that these guys have, Bada. They got the same model. They're going to claim that they're providing affordable housing for folks that look like you and me. And in all actuality, within 5 years, they will sell the property to another owner who will not have those obligations. It is a scam.
Well, and
so anything you can do,
and maybe it could be the case, Paul, too, that we don't know exactly what she's talking about. And I know we had some folks on, so maybe this could be a question that we revisit with someone that is from that department. And I know we had another question from the audience that Zan was going to put. So does tying certain government funds to property taxes like education funding affect fair housing? Ooh, that's a good question. And I'll say shout out to Bobby. She is our Social Security and Disability attorney in our office. So shout out to Bobby. We've all been remote for about 1.5 years, and I miss her. So does anybody want to take a stab at this?
I'm going to attempt to, okay, because I think that tying certain government funds to property taxes could be troublesome, given the fact that, oh, Lord have mercy, I'm sorry, y'all. Given the fact that
it's good.
Education.
We hope lots of people are calling Bookstore.
Listen, it's a good problem to have. Given the fact that education funding is undervalued depending upon where your house is and what type of property that you have. So I believe this could it depends. It could definitely be problematic, just because of the inequities that we're already experiencing in education as it is. I guess too, I would also say how much, is there a range? Or is it just a particular sum that is universal? Because if it is on a scale, depending on how much your property taxes actually are worth, are you going to get a smaller sum or are you going to get a larger sum? And I think that's what happens when you have inequities.
Leave it to Bobby to pose a question that actually has left me with more questions. I'm resisting the urge to add on to this question, but I won't do it because we want to be mindful of your time. So we just want to take a moment and thank you for joining us today. This conversation has been much needed and very insightful. And it's something that we don't always have the space to discuss. Shout out to Legal Services of Eastern Michigan, and not just saying that because we work for them, but for creating this safe space for us to be able to journey into this conversation. We want to thank our panelists today for coming and bringing your insight transparently and unapologetically. Thank you for that. We want to thank our viewers for rocking with us. As always, we need to get a timeline of how long we've been doing these Legal Services of Eastern Michigan legal lounges, because you all have been staying true and loyal to us this entire time. We thank you all for sharing your beautiful digital energy. Katie, do we have a date for next month's Legal Lounge conversation?
I believe I want to say July 20th, and it's going to be marijuana law, which should be a good one.
Oh, okay. July. Wait, I was going to. It's 4/20. Nope, that's April. Never mind.
July 20th.
Okay.
Yep.
July 20. The 20 is consistent, right? So
I always think she's sneaking this question in. You ask me every time, and every time I've got to look at my calendar like I'm.
So
like it's a surprise.
I know it's not a surprise. Yes. You knew it was coming. So we look forward to seeing you July 20th for a conversation on marijuana law. And thank you again, as always. Peace and power from the Legal Services of Eastern Michigan Legal Lounge. Until next time, Xander, take us out this thing.
Take us out.